Hi my dear voice students. Today I am going to talk about importance of self-education and reading books on vocal technique. In some scientific disciplines like mathematics, history and other, we definitely need to self-educate ourselves by reading books when we come from lectures and from our teachers. That's essential part of self-education. By that simple analogy, reading the book on vocal technique will be kind of filling up the gaps in our vocal education. Is that really so? By the title of this program, you probably already guessed that I'm not a big champion of reading books for young or even intermediate students. And I will make my point. Vocal books, no matter how well they're written, no matter by whom they're written, and no matter for whom they're written, doomed to be confusive in a past, in a present, and in a future. Great American bass Jerome Hines writes in his famous book, The Four Voices of Man, word of caution. If you're not in an advanced level of training, keep this book on the shelf until your teacher recommends you read it. You can answer, of course, that my teacher will never recommend to read it. And then he has another note. If you're an advanced student and your teacher does not recommend to read this book, change your teacher. Jerome Hines' first book, Great Singers on Great Singing, is of course much more popular than his second one, The Four Voices of Man, because it interviews great singers on great singing, and definitely we are all attracted to celebrities' opinions. This is the humble opinion of the great baritone Cornell McNeil. While giving the interview to Jerome Hines, he said, "I want to go on record that I don't think this book should be written. It's a mistake. It will do more harm than good. So why is it so dangerous to read vocal suggestions, even if they come from the great singers you love and adore? The true meaning of the terms we use in vocal art is always inseparable with personal experience of the singer or the school he represents. Of course, school of singing or method cannot have a personal experience. It's always a collective experience. We can define vocal terms and sensations scientifically or pseudo-scientifically, like describing placement feelings of every note you sing and where this note should be felt, or using good analogies or even poetry, or when you sing feel like the whole universe opens into you, or empirically when you take a high note feel like you're smelling a rose. But it has the same effect as describing the sunrise to a totally blind person who might enjoy the description poetically but will never experience it. But we will still miss 90% of the experience that is much greater than any book about it. I'll give you some quotes from vocal art geniuses like Caruso, Gili and others. Let's start with Beniamino Gili, a great Italian tenor who was a successor of Enrico Caruso. But I warn you that you will understand this controversy only if you know Beniamino Gili's singing and technique. In the book Gili and Traditions, we find 25 vocal commandments of the great tenor. Let's compare his quotes and what we really hear from Gili. Commandment number 16. Bend over the chair to send your voice through your nose. Commandment number 18. Singer's nose is a real loudspeaker. So, if we didn't have Gili's recordings, we would assume that Gili was extremely a nasal singer. So logically, we'd probably expect that Gili would also suggest to send your voice over the auditorium to the last person in a row. But surprisingly, in his first commandment, Gili suggests to imagine the public behind you. Vocal scientists were so confused with his statements that they would try to interpret it their own way. So they started conversations like this. Well, Gili never sang in the nose. Why he suggested so-called nasal projection? And here comes the interpretation. By the nose, he suggested actually the maschera feelings. So we have psychophysiological question here. He didn't sing nasally, but he had nasal feelings or nasal sensations. Or he just simply accepted these suggestions because they were popular during his ear, but he found his own way. Right now it is really impossible to say, because you have to be Beniamino Gili to really understand it. And then we go to great Enrico Caruso, who never suggested to sing in the nose, but at the same time he suggested to cover the voice, to modify the vowel. He never really modified himself. So the term cover immediately becomes to be very obscure and confusive. I speak in details about this controversy in my other programs, especially in a program dedicated to Enrico Caruso. It seems like majority of the great singers agree that one should cover his voice while singing high notes. Covering technique was accepted by majority of vocal teachers and singers, so there was no doubt that the singer can do without it. So, without even really hearing what Beniamino Gili was doing, they asked him directly, "Maestro Gili, how do you cover your voice, please?" Gili looked at them and said, "Well, I'm sorry, but I don't cover my voice." He described his high notes technique as just simply having a great support. We know that Gili quoted many controversial statements, and that probably seems like one of them. But as an appoggio teacher, I totally agree with that statement. The point of Italian covering technique is not covering at all, but keeping your voice round at all times in low, middle and high register, while balancing it with the diaphragm. This is what I call a pure appoggio approach. Some may greatly disagree to what I say right now, because we are all conditioned with a certain knowledge. But my point is that the words or vocal terms are really useless without experience. So it will not surprise me if the teacher who really claims that he teaches covering technique will really teach appoggio or open throat diaphragmical balance. And the one who claims to be an appoggio teacher will actually teach you how to cover your voice rather than support it. Are we in catch-22 then? Yes, we are, if we trust words more than experience. This was Franco Tonelli. Until next time.